Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Tales of the Buller. Sitting opposite me today is one Jeff Richards, who is a very well-known character around the Buller, born and bred. I won't go into detail about what he's done because it'll be far more interesting coming from him. The only thing I do know, and as I don't know Jeff really well, I've been here a couple of years, but one thing I can say is whenever I see his ute go past, I know he's on the way to help someone or probably coming back from just helping someone. That's the sort of bloke he is. So here he is. How you going there, mate?
I'm pretty good. Tad nervous, but we'll get through that.
We will get through that.
Yeah, not a problem.
So thank you very much for coming. I know it's a bit nerve-wracking when you first start these things. Jeff's got a wee bit of experience of this, as some of you might know, because he can tell you he's done some radio in Buller, and he's been compere and he does auctions and all sorts of things. So I'll tell you what, Jeff, we'll just start out by telling us about your early life, where you were born and where you went to school, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was born in Westport about 72 years ago and
Roughly.
grew up for the first 20 years in Westport before moving to Carter's Beach. Early years, I had a privileged upbringing. I reckon I was privileged. We lived in a big house, my sister and my brother, and the side section was our playground. We had a huge section where everybody would turn up to play cricket or rugby or fives and overs or bull rush or whatever you wanted to play. Most of the kids in the community just come to our place until it was dark, until Mum called out it was time to come inside and have a stand-up wash, save the hot water. But our family, our grandparents lived with us, and they were tremendous people. My mum and dad. My dad had come out of an orphanage, so he was an amazing person, and so was my mum. But my dad, they talk about people that come from orphanages, how roughly treated they were. He was the soft one in the family and spent a lot of time out playing sport with us on the side section with all the kids in the neighbourhood. It must have hooked onto me because I seem to spend more time with kids than I do adults. So my grandparents, like I say, lived with us. My grandfather had built the butcher's shop on Millerton many, many years ago, and then went on to owning several hotels in the Buller district and the big one, the Empire down in Ross. My mum says she was privileged but not spoiled. That meant she worked in the hotels as well. And one story in 1929, when the big earthquake happened, my grandfather told me he'd seen the town clock fall down. I thought, how could you have done that? But it turns out his hotel was in the main street, and about 3 blocks up the main street was the town clock that fell over in the earthquake. The reason he's seen it, he was rushing out as soon as he could get stabilised to get his daughter, my mum, from across the road at the school. So I presume he's seen a pile of dust, everything up the road. He was a real character. I learned a bit off him, but as a magician and things like that, my mum and my grandmother had shut him down. He wasn't allowed to teach me all the things. So that was my grandparents. They were fantastic people. And coming home from school, I remember we'd come home at dinner time at 12 o'clock for dinner because they'd run hotels. We'd have nice meals. And we'd always have pudding. There'd be sago, rice, tapioca, cream, just about every dinner out. What I call dinner out, 12 o'clock. Then going along from there, we had the sport on the side section. And we gravitated to my brother and I and my sister playing sport in the district. We played rugby, not so much cricket. My dad was a good golfer. I remember one day he had Arnie, my brother, out the back, trying to teach him how to play golf, and only got it pretty good and went straight through the wash house one day. And it was just one of many windows that my dad fixed. And my mum was that good-hearted. We had a fishing net from the fisheries hung over out the side of our house, right down one side of the house, covering 3 full sets of windows. So because we had that many broken windows, either into the lounge or our bedroom, that's Arnie's and I bedroom, or my sister's bedroom down the back. So sport played a big part in our lives growing up. We had swimming. We spent a lot of time At the beach, you could bike down the shingle beach. But getting back to home life, as a kid growing up, I often listen to what kids have to have and what they have to do now. I get up in the morning. My grandfather had been up 2 hours before. He'd been rolling his bloody park drive or whatever he smoked, and he'd be having a smoke. The coal range would be down to embers. They'd stick a rack on the top of it, and that's how we done our toast. So I've more likely had enough carbon to last me a lifetime just off the toast. We didn't have electric jug. We didn't need it. We had a kettle. We didn't have a telephone. We didn't need it. The neighbours had one. If it was an emergency, the neighbours would come over and say, oh. And we didn't have a car. Didn't need one. We had bikes. And it didn't affect the way we lived. We had a great life. We didn't have TV, which I think was a big saviour. For a long, long time, no one in Westport had TV. That meant kids got out. They went to scouts. I can remember my dad take me along to boxing when I was about 9 or 10, and Gerald Hart would be able to tell you the story. Peter Youngshack, a Chinaman, beat the shit out of me, but he wasn't, he just come out of there like a windmill. And yeah, so you go to boxing, and Juicy would be there, Juicy Siren would be there, and he was Australasian, maybe cruiserweight, heavyweight boxing champion. You could listen to his fights on the radio in those days. And he was in the Commonwealth Games, so Joe would be dancing around the ring, shadow boxing, looking in the mirror. And if you got too close, you just stick. Didn't travel very far, but he thought it was hilarious. These kids would do somersaults.
I thought you were going to say it was Gerald Hart who beat the shit out of you.
No, he would be no good at boxing. Couldn't box his way out of a paper bag. No. Getting back to the boxing, we'd stand on Joe's hands. He'd lie on the ground, and we'd pick up the medicine ball and we'd drop it in his stomach. Boom, boom, boom. We'd throw it in his stomach as hard as we could. We were only 9 or 10 years old. Then he would stand on our hands, pick up the medicine ball, and you just drop it in your stomach, and you try to tense up and keep your feet on the floor and all that. And then just for fun, you drop it on your face. So that meant you'd go home crying. And I'd tell my dad, I'm not going back. Oh, you'll be away you go. But every kid played sport. There was indoor basketball. The swimming club was strong. Cycling was strong. That's something I didn't get into. But athletics, heaps of athletics. And I'll speak about that a little way further on when I start talking about earning a few bob yourself as you grow up. So I'll do it. Yeah, I'll talk about the paper runs. I had a paper run, a couple of my mates, and we used to earn in pound, shillings and pence days. It was 17 and 6. That was under $2 to be on a paper run. Biking around at night. Nelson Mail, you got a little bit more money. Westport News, not as much. The next thing to come along was the milk cart. The milk cart, vivid in my memories. Great fun, great money. If you imagine a paper boy didn't get $2 a week, if you worked on the milk cart, you could get $5 or $6 a week, at least. 12 and 6 a night, $1.20 a night if you're the boss boy. But that meant 3 years on the cart, there'd be a driver, person on the left-hand side, and then you'd be on the right-hand side as boss boy. That meant you run across the road, a grass verge, over the footpath, pick up the empty bottles, run back, and this horse and cart is jogging along. You did not want to stop the horse trotting, so as you run, and you kept running, and you had to jump off forwards. If you jumped off backwards, that was it. The bottles smash everywhere. We used to get in a little bit of trouble with the police because occasionally we'd hit cars because we'd have the joker who was supposed to be driving it sitting on the left-hand side, helping run with the trainee learner fella. And so it becomes something of a lot of kids worked on the milk cart, and a lot of kids would be able to reflect on working on there. And when things went wrong, if you consider from Rome Street down, we'd leave the dairy, deliver one trailer load of milk. It was a big 4-wheel trailer with a turntable, and we had a draft horse pulling it, or about a quarter draft. And then we'd go back to the dairy, unload, load up again, and go out. And we'd go out as far as the Irrawaddy Bridge and round Brome Street. The other cart would do what we call a north end, up round we done the north end, the south end, which was up round the South School and the O'Connor Home and everything like that. Both runs were about the same distance. But the last cart in, that boy had to take the horses away out over the back of Craddock Park. There used to be paddocks over there, so it's the last driver in had to get on one of the horses and lead the other one. Well, some Friday nights you'd just go out and thrash the horse with the reins and just let them go, and then go and tell the boss the horses are bolted to the bloody stables, and he'd come out in his little truck and try to follow them. You know, they knew where they were going. That was another thing. You earned enough money to do what you like. You go to the pictures. It cost very little to go to the pictures. We had 2 picture theatres. We had the Vic Picture Theatre, which was a nice picture theatre down the bottom end of town, St James at the top end of town, and the fact that you're earning really good money. I can't really relate to how much it would have been to go to the pictures. If you went with, say, 30 cents today, you would have gotten to the pictures and got an ice cream. 50 cents would have got you into the pictures, got an ice cream, and you would have been off to get fish and chips. So it just shows you how prices change over time. And wages, yeah. So is the milk cart. Oh, one story I must relate was the Governor General, I don't know whether it's Freiburg or Ferguson, come to town, and he come out of the Melbourne hotel with his Batman, with his thing under his arm, standing there to watch the milk cart go past. Well, the boys thought this is hilarious, so we put 2 shilling pieces in one eye. He wore a monocle, so we thought it was quite funny for us to go past with, well, 2 shilling piece in one eye, looking back at him. Very quickly the police arrived. Then his Batman arrived round in the car that he was travelling New Zealand in. In those days, you used to be able to be sent to Borstal. I think that's the closest we got to being sent to Borstal. It was rather terrifying, the dressing down we got. Gerald Hart, who dobbed me in the last commentary, he was on the milk cart. He's a lot older than I am, so he spent some time on the milk cart, but he got into more trouble than I did, and he would have known more about Borstal because he just about went, I reckon. He had an altercation with a policeman, and he turned himself into a modern-day crusader and painted on the policeman's house with a 4-inch paintbrush and red lead paint that he more than likely had pinched from the railway, Chubby Checker. And his mother's biking home from the Cos Hotel in the morning because she cooked breakfast at the Cos Hotel. She'd go down early and cook the breakfast, and then she'd go home and go back later in the day to do the cooking at the Cos. And she said someone's written all over the policeman's house and they can't even spell properly. So in time, he got caught out for it. He more than likely was covered in paint. So I thought that just evens the score a little bit. But I might as well put him right in it because I'm thinking, would he do this to me? Of course he would. Because he had more problems with the police, and they'd just got an electric typewriter, not electronic, not upmarket thing. Maybe the first electric typewriter in Westport. I think, but I'm not 100% sure, but someone must have taken it off the counter when no one was about, and it ended up underneath Bailey and Neville's licensing place across the road from the police station. How's that for you, Gerald? Do you want me to say some more? I'll let you off from here on through for a little bit. Rightio, I said about the paper runs. Now, living at home, there was enough room for me to have a horse. I'd go out and someone would give me an old trotter or something. They'd come from the grubs out the Cape, and you could have, things. I had a good friend in Glen Shaw, and this covers off this a little bit. I had a cat called Tittywits, and because I spent a lot of time down the racecourse as well, helping Dane Alexander with his racehorses, as a kid just carting buckets of water with Ross Archibald and a few of us would go down there. But Glenn unfortunately died in a parachuting accident. But prior to that, my cat Tittywits, I'd been virtually kicked out of home, but lived outside anyway at home. And I'd get meat from the butcher shop and go down and feed it down the racecourse. And it pretty much survived on its own until it died. And then Glenn decided if we buried it in a box, he would dig it up at a later date and put the skeleton together. He was a little bit of a different fella, Glenn Shaw. Very artistic, but a great mate. He was one of the ones that drove milk horses but didn't get out and run. He had Leo, one of the best horses we had on the milk cart, and he just stayed and done that side of it.
I can just stop you for one sec there.
Yes.
Jeff. Just get you to elaborate a wee bit when you just said when you're at home, you're more or less living outside. What does that mean?
Well, we spend all our time outside playing sport or
Oh, I
biking
see.
to
I see.
farms or things like that. I get tripped up very easily.
I thought you meant you'd had an argument. You pitched the tent outside.
No.
Right, mate. No,
We were very lucky kids actually.
sounds like it. Sounds like a great way to grow up.
Oh, it was. Yes. And from then on, where did I end up? Schooling was pretty average at school. Might not have even been average. I got through a lot on being able to talk a bit. I know the primary school teachers, knowing that I'd spend a lot of time at the race course, would send me over there. This is primary school to put the bets on for them. So they'd write their bets out for the gallops, and I'd go over there and I'd find someone to put the bets on. I'd go backwards and forwards to the school, the North School. As the races went on for Roger Jeffries, and there'd be John Hunt, Sid Kelly, a few of them. I wouldn't get it mixed up because I'd take the tickets back. They were in the days when you actually got a ticket, but I'd have to find someone on course to put the bets on for them. I enjoyed my time at the race course. It was great fun being around those people. From then on, I went to high school for not very long. I spent a year there and a little bit, and found a job in the butcher shop. I left to go to work in the butcher shop, and again that Joe Soren pops his head up. I thought he owned the butcher shop. When he offered me the job, I thought, rightio, here we go. I'll go and ask Mum and Dad. And they thought, well, that's a pretty good job, craft to learn, so it was a trade. And I'd done my time in the butcher shop, about 4.5 years with Tom Dixon and Denny Broad, and they were characters. One story about Denny Broad, you can understand back then we're still in pound, shilling, pence days, and we only had one chook in there. We had a small freezer, and a lady came and asked to buy a chook. So Denny went out and says to the lady, "Oh, that'll be 17 shillings. It's quite expensive, actually." And she says, "Oh, you wouldn't have a bigger one, would you?" And he says, "Yes, I think we have." And he went back out the back, come back in with the same chook and put it on the scales and says, "Oh, that's 21 shillings. She says, "I'll take both of them." Well, at that stage, I knew he was done because I knew we only had one chook. And then he says, "Oh, well, we've got a bit of a problem there. You have to make up your mind whether you want the smaller one or the bigger one, because I've actually taken this out of another parcel that's going to Knockawar later in the day." So he got away with it. But he was a great person for our community. I just see here, he must have kept track of me many years later when they bought the first wheelchair minibus. He seconded me onto the committee, and we went ahead and fundraised and done radiothons and all sorts of things, and he was an amazing fundraiser. So the first wheelchair minibus it was then for the O'Connor home and people that had needed that help was through his ability to do things. Then from working there, I went to the cement works, and I walked in the gate, and I don't know how kids get jobs these days, but I walked and I seen this Alan Lang, and he told me, "Yeah, there's a job in the mill house. You can start in a fortnight." That's about how long it took. As I walked out, Billy Neal, another mate of mine, was in the pay office. He said, "What are you doing here, Jeff?" I says, "I've just got a job in the mill house." "Oh," he says, "you don't want to work in the mill house. Bloody rowdy place." Wait a minute. And he rang Brian Ryan, who run the servicing for all the truck fleet out there, all the tankers and earth moving stuff, dozers and whatever we had. And he says to Brian Ryan, "I've got young Jeff Richards here. Jack and Vera's son." Yeah. "Well, he's just got a job in the mill house." And that's a shit of a place to work. So, "Do you think you can take him up there?" And that's how it turned out. I ended up working in the lorry garage. Within about 2 years, they gave me an adult apprenticeship. I must have been getting up around 21, somewhere around there. And I'd been doing the apprenticeship for about 2 years, and someone worked out I'd only had 1 year's secondary education. So you had to have 2 years secondary education to have a trade. So back to night school for 2 years doing school cert maths and English. They initially were just going to kick me off the apprenticeship. I wasn't struggling. I would always go and ask for help, and being an adult apprenticeship, they paid me adult wages to do my apprenticeship. And I worked with several great mechanics. Alan Crop, little fellow who's in town now, he's one of the top ones I worked with. Always great helper. And Charlie Egerton was my boss. Barry Hickey was overall boss. But yeah, Charlie Egerton had worked for 25 years down the Chatham Islands in the crayfish boom. And he used to like a bit of the amber fluid and that, and you didn't sort of upset him before 10 o'clock in the morning. And you made sure you got things as good as you could do them, because if you didn't, you'd just take the spanners off you and they'd fly around the workshops. And I remember one day I was gas cutting and not making a very good job. I hadn't been shown how to do it. Well, that went out of my hand, it was still going, and I found an old fellow, Jimmy Kissel. I says, Jim, what am I doing wrong here? And within 2 minutes, he taught me how to gas cut, how to set the torch. So as long as you approach people the right way, you could get things done. I spend a lot of time in the quarry after I'd done my time as a diesel mechanic. Went down there as basically the fix-it man, whatever broke down. You had to have a go at fixing it. So they put me through welding tickets in New Plymouth, and I've been to Polytechs and Invercargill, learning about computers and trucks and stuff like that. I often think they should have sent a younger fellow. I was about 50 when they sent me to Invercargill, these computers and trucks.
So what you're telling me is you're quite good at computers, then?
No, I don't even know how to switch them on. These things, you just plugged them in, and it was like noughts and crosses. The biggest problem was finding, they did tell you what sensor had died or what was going wrong, but then you had to actually find the sensor, especially on the loaders. Some loaders were better put together than others, and you could repair them. But I always found if I got hold of the telephone, I could ring people. Some of our big drill rigs, I think we had one of the 3 biggest drill rigs in the South Island for some time. And if it broke down and I was having too much trouble, I'd either head up the hill, up to Stockton, and have a talk to Jacob Sutherland, or the great JC was up there, and they'd give me some help, or else I'd just ring the factory in the States in the middle of the night.
Well, Jesus was working at the
Yeah,
was
yeah.
I thought he did get it off that.
Well, they called him the great JC. I don't even know his proper name.
I tell you what, that sounds like a great company, mate. Put you through, let you do your night school, which is pretty admirable, and pay you your adult wages. And I'll tell you something else. What you just said there, I think it's a bit of a worry these days. But you're taking it for granted. But actually, when you're working, asking people for help, that's a skill. Not everyone has that. Not everyone can actually go out and ask for help. They find it very difficult. I wonder if that's a time thing, that it used to be much easier.
I don't know. You looked at how you had to fix something, you give it your best shot. If you could understand how it worked, you had a pretty good chance of fixing it. And I used to lay things out methodically. If I took a hydraulic bank bits, I'd lay it out methodically on the table on a bit of newspaper and that. Now, if someone come in and moved one of those bloody parts or ended it, then I had to put my thinking cap on. I think, Jesus, was that like that when I took it out? Because it's virtually laziness if you can mark all the parts. Like, it's easier now. You just get your cell phone out and take some photos, and you've got a record sitting there. But yeah, if you had failures, you made sure you didn't do it like that twice. But I did work with some characters. I worked with a fellow when I went down there. It was Archie Forsyth. His son Brian, he runs a high school down here now. He's deputy principal or something like that. Now, I worked with Archie up until he died, and he was a character. Like, the first vehicle we had was a Second World War Army workshop. If you imagine, this joke is only about 5'5", I suppose, 5'6", and to get into the back of this truck, and it was a great big flathead V8 thing with bloody special tyres just in case they got shot out. It should have been in a museum, not in our quarry. and it had a generator in there, and we had a welder. We could put it in gear. But the problem was driving around the quarry, all the belts would get full of mud, and you put it in gear to make it. It didn't want to work. And Archie was a real character. He was amazing. Other people I worked with there, Stacey, Kevy Roberts, Tony Warren, Hazy, Crazy Hazy. He's gone very well in life. He's one of the top people for Wholesome at the moment. Alandanar. Now, you could do a whole podcast about Alandanar. But I'll tell you one little story. We had two canteens. One had a big, huge potbelly stove, and at 2:30 in the afternoon, when he was having an afternoon smoke, he'd bring out a great big biscuit tin, and he'd still have some sandwiches left. Now, this joke was about 6'2", big for his age. Had 100 games for Buller back in the days when they only played 6 games a year. Well, this chap sitting opposite him was watching Lander eating his smokos, his sandwich, and Lander says, "Would you like a sandwich?" I won't say the joker's name. And this fella says, yeah, I'd love to, Lander. I'm like, well, here, have one of these. Well, when it got to about Wednesday, I says to Lander, it's about time you stop making those dog roll sandwiches for that joker. And he'd say, woof, woof, that fella, woof. And he'd start barking. And I says, Lander, you can't keep doing it. He says, well, what am I going to do with the rest of the dog roll? I haven't got a dog. So I think by the end of the week, he had built this joker up. It must have been quite healthy for you.
Oh, yeah, you're right, yeah.
But he done all sorts of practical things. Kids that arrived to work in the quarry, and the first place they go to would be the canteen. They'd make the cups of tea and that, and Lander would go in and say, look, I want you to paint all these stalls. I haven't done before 10 o'clock in the morning. And then the jokers would come in to have their smoke over the truck drivers and the loader drivers, and all the stalls were all painted. And the kid would proceed to say, well, that man over there, don't you this little bastard, I'll kick your ass. I didn't tell you to do that. Why would I tell you to do that? And then he'd get him outside and train him for shot fires and be throwing bloody gelignite up in the air, and these kids would just about be crying. Now, the quarry manager couldn't control him, but that's all right. He also taught some of them how to drive. You get them on our old 250 International tractor, and he'd get in about second gear, and he'd just be ticking away, and then he'd jump off and leave them. Now, some of these kids struggle to ride a bike. They'd never been on anything where they had to turn the wheel and drive it. But, yes, he had some other stories. He'll play a big part in one of the things I do very shortly. I end up with odd jobs, fundraising, and helping groups out. I do a bit of auctioneering, and I've been lucky enough to do 100 years of Buller rugby jerseys, 125 years of Buller rugby jerseys. I had one of my granddaughters model a rugby jersey for 125 years, Stella, who now is the youngest or the first woman coach for the Buller women's team. That's a full-time job. She's the Buller coach. So maybe it's time I jump to my wife, Wizzy, and tell you a little bit about her. Her and I had 2 kids. We've got 2 kids, Rebecca and Quentin. Quentin and Trudy have got 4 kids. Bex or Rebecca and Tony have got 2. So I've got 6 of the best grandkids going around. And people will tell you, don't run into Jeff because he will talk the leg. He idolises these 6 kids and thinks they're the best at everything. And I've been lucky enough, like one of them was in an under-9 team to go to Australia to play basketball. That was Edie. And she was a young kid, and she was fundraising. So I had the chainsaw out, cutting some firewood. And Terry McDonnell, a farmer out the Cape, was good enough to have some great big pine trees cut down. So I'd be sawing, cut these rings off. So as I put her in all the gear that you needed, bloody goggles and hat, jacket, started up the chainsaw. But first I took the chain off the chainsaw. I'd cut right through the log, and all she had to do was rev it and just tip it sideways, and the log would fall. The only thing I had to be worried about, it rolled back towards her. And you can take into it, she might have been 9 years old. So as I videoed it, and when her parents sent, they went right off. They actually thought she'd cut the bloody chainsaw thing off. All she had to do was just rev it and just tilt the blade over and it would fall off and roll away. So that's the oldest of my granddaughters. Then we got Stella, Hermione. They play brilliant sport. Hermione's a little bit violent, actually. No, she's good. She plays to win.
Good stuff.
Yeah, and then we've got Jethro. That's in the same family. He's right into his dancing, jazz, tap. Oh, not tap. No, he does jazz and he does other dancing. He will be good at basketball when he decides to get as aggressive as his sisters. Then we'll jump to the other family, Jack and Summer. They live in Nelson now. Jack thinks he's bulletproof. He can do everything. He's the youngest. He actually, sidetrack here. He wrote to a very important person in New Zealand, and he hasn't had a reply back. He had to write to someone important. He's 9 years old at this stage. He wrote to Jacinda and said he was happy that she had sorted out the COVID because he had had COVID and he got over it, but he didn't think it was fair you were taking the Hiluxes off people because those electric cars won't go in the water. And
Good on him.
yeah, and then he signed his name and says, I don't think the farmers like it. Now, where he got all this information, I don't know, but
it's a mystery.
a kid at 9 years old, I don't know where he's heading. And his sister, Jack, is very competitive, likes his cricket, plays basketball, plays soccer. Summer plays soccer as a young kid. She's about 13, heading for 14 now, but she is a very good cricketer. She was represented the Nelson senior women's representative team. I think she's played against Wellington and Taranaki.
How old is
She's 14 now.
Whoa.
And
Good
so
effort.
she's gone places I don't know of any other sports kid. I claim them as Westport kids, or my kids anyway. And the level she's playing cricket at the moment is quite phenomenal, considering she's not very tall. She's not a 6 foot, 14-year-old kid. But the fun you can have with kids, maybe I'll bounce off to what I've done around the community. I've had about 46 years on the Carter's Beach Domain Board. When I first, if we do it, when I
46
first,
years.
I'm old.
Yeah.
But when I bounced back and first think about it, we had a group of people, and what they'd done is stripped all the sand from in front of the houses at Carter's Beach, if you know the area out past in front of the shop, and take it down to the airport and filled in around the airport. So it had been left to grow in gorse and blackberry and broom, and there wasn't the playing fields that are there now, or playing fields that were there after we developed it. We had lots of help from Ministry of Works. The County Council still worked then. Ministry of Works, County Council, District Council helped us, and we levelled the whole field out, and we ended up with several sports being played there. They played a lot of cricket. We prepared 2 cricket wickets going back many years, and Chris Ken's come here as a schoolboy. Basically, he got more runs than anybody else and could have bowled out any team by himself. It was lucky we had good management, or they had good management of their team. He'd bowl so many overs, and then they'd just take him out of the attack. And he got more runs than most teams by himself. But that was on the Domain. We had grass wickets there. At a later date, BJ Roates, who lives opposite the Domain, put some concrete ones in for us that we had a matting go over it. Bob Pratt had come out, and they'd roll mats out over them for the cricket. Cricket was pretty strong back then.
Brilliant.
The hockey was all played out here, or a percentage of the hockey was played out here, and they had their own pavilion down towards the airport end of the Domain. And part of the reason they come out here is because they got it for free. I understood, I helped on the Domain board to reiterate that if you get it for free and you look after the ground, that's all you got to do. You mow it, you get it for free. And they did share in a section of the rates. That's all they had to do is find a little bit of money for that. So we had the league team out here. We had the Stags out here. They played on a Sunday. They were in a league competition that went through the Greymouth competition. And we had junior and senior teams. My boy played in one of the junior teams, but he used to get concussion quite badly. So other sports we had out there, we had baseball out there at one stage. The kennel club was there. The kennel club was there, I think, just about before I come onto the domain.
I've heard about that. They
That,
still,
that
they
was
still
there for
have
many
dog
years.
shows down there, don't they? They do
Yeah.
dog shows.
Yeah, they have run them at the motor camp now.
Oh, okay.
Initially, the motor camp, you couldn't have dogs in there, so they used to run out of the domain. Other things on the domain, I remember run a gala, 2-day gala, and we raised something like $7,000, and that built the fort. And a lot of kids that have played in Carter's Beach or grew up in Westport will remember the fort because the slide was deadly. I wanted something that, was different or better than what anybody else had, and we ended up with a great stainless steel slide. Now, Warren Bainbridge helped me fold up the stainless steel. Geet Alexander, Brian Forsyth before he was a school teacher, Glenn Alley, Robert's brother. And Geet was the contractor that built it. And for $7,000, we got a great big fort structure. It was several levels high.
Well,
I
so
think
you actually built it?
No, we got Geet Alexander and his a carpenter with his crew, and those other people I mentioned worked for him. Now, I thought I was the first one to come down that slide once we put the stainless steel sides on it and that. And at a later date, Donnie McClellan showed me his two boys, Brent and Glenn, coming down when it was only a flat base. The sides hadn't even been put on. So I wasn't the first down the slide.
Never mind.
That's right. And so kids circulated around there, had great fun. At a later date, I was gifted a big merry-go-round with the 5-glass horses and all that stuff. And the chap that gave it to me asked me to fundraise for the domain with it. After about 5 years, he asked me how we were going. I says, well, we haven't made a lot of money with it at all. He says, well, we should have. I says, no, if the Plunkett wanted it, the company, Wholesome, well, it wasn't the Guardian Cement away back then, would give me a half a day off and I'd take it to town, put it up. And as long as someone looked after it, I didn't take any funds. I let the Plunkett have the money, or if it was for a school or whatever it was, I just put it up in company time, take it down in company time, and they would get the money. Turned out he didn't think that was a good idea, so he asked for it back, and I thought, shit, that's good. It was a big hardwood cross. It's exactly the same as what you see in the AMP show now.
Oh, I see.
That's what it was. It was, yeah. Then I graduated to a big blow-up, slidey thing, bouncy castle. I've now got the second one. I've since had to buy it because of health and safety, but they give me a really good deal. Bank. All I had to do was get rid of the emblem off the side. Some people, I do about 6 or 8 free things a year, and then other than that, I charge for individual parties and that. The help offset.
I've seen it a few times. It's pretty awesome. I'm actually just going to cut in there, Jeff, because we're running over time.
All right.
Which is fine because it's been fantastic, mate. But just what I can see right here is I wouldn't even say touch the surface. We haven't scratched it, mate. So I'd be very happy if you could come back and continue in part 2 one day.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, good as gold.
In the near future.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of fun, helping with the fundraising and the auctions and the different things for different communities. I don't have any special skills, but I don't mind teasing people. Like Mike sitting there grinning at me. 2 days ago, I ended up with all my hair cut off for St. John's, but I hope it grows back.
And raised $500 to boot.
Right. So he may have me back. He might think that bastard could talk underwater. Okay?
No,
Thank you.
It has been a great pleasure, Jeff. Thank you very much, mate.
Up and under.